There's often a lot of emphasis put on marriage and family in Christian communities, and it's easy to understand why. Marriage and family are both good gifts from God that really enrich people's lives in many ways. But we also have to keep in mind that the way that people in the Bible worked towards marriage and approached marriage is not necessarily the way that we have to today. And there are also very significant examples of people in the Bible who never got married at all, but still felt a strong sense of love and belonging from a community of faith. So let's see if we can get some more perspective on this topic.
Once upon a time,
Boy meets girl.
Girl meets boy.
He was the only one for her.
She was the only one for him.
They were destined
To be together.
And they lived happily ever after.
but is it really ever as simple as that? The Bible contains only a handful of love stories. Ruth and Boaz, who are brought together from different nations and cultures and meet in an unusual way, are the only ones to get their own book. Through their romance, they become the ancestors of Israel's great King David, and eventually of Jesus himself. Their story is the closest we have in the Bible to a modern fairy tale romance. Through them, we learn that God does care about romantic relationships and works through them. Other love stories in the Bible can be harder for us to relate to. Jacob had to work for years before Laban would allow him to marry his daughter Leah, and eventually her sister Rachel. And Isaac and Rebekah get married after only meeting each other once. Marriage in Bible times was often like a transaction, and not necessarily a celebration of individual choices. Arranged marriages were the common way of bringing people together. For many, this worked well. We are told that Isaac and Rebekah were happy. For others, like Solomon, hundreds of arranged marriages ended up in failure and loss. Not every example of romance in the Bible is given as a good example, and some things that worked in those times and in that culture might not work today in Western culture.
So you might be wondering, do I have a soulmate?
The Bible doesn't tell us whether this is so.
In fact, instructions about remarriage after the death of a spouse in the Bible seem to imply that there could be more than one true love in a person's lifetime.
What the Bible does tell us is that marriage is a good gift from God, and that those who enter this relationship with self-giving love will find God's blessings. Proverbs 18:22 says, "He who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord."
The Bible also teaches that it is totally acceptable and normal to live a whole life without a romantic partner. To be like Paul or Jesus himself, for the Christian, there is no shame in singleness, for in Christ all are complete.
The Bible teaches us that God is every person's ultimate soulmate. Our human relationships here teach us about the relationship we have with Him, which will one day be face to face. We can't know that every person has a soulmate, but we do know that all things work together for good, for those who love God and are called according to His purposes. God will oversee every person's unique story in this life and guide those who love Him towards what is good. For some, it might look like a fairy tale. For others, it might look like a long and complex journey. But for all, it will be a path to one day seeing true love, face to face in its purest form.
And they lived happily ever after.